Visions of beings, big and small, old and young, all different shapes. I used to see them stuck in these squares, and it used to kill me why they had done it to themselves. Nothing in our universe was square, yet they had all accepted their roles as squares. Trapped in square houses, on square blocks, and flattened squares of cropland surrounded by square walls, which encircled the oblong earth, which encircled the spherical sun, and somewhere there was a supermassive black hole which was probably spherical and encircling something else which probably wasn't square. If we sat here perfectly still for a lifetime, just the three of us, sitting in front of this cabin staring forward, all we would see is a square. If we never moved, the cabin would always be a square to us. To the left of me, you, the dogmatic rationalist, would tell me about the scientific proof of squares. There are only squares. That's all there is, you'd say. It's been proven. To the right of me, you, the religious zealot, would quote the ancient scripture of the square, which says, there's more than squares out there. You just have to have faith. There's more than just squares because my square book says so. Suppose one day I stood up for the first time and took a step to the left. I'd see two walls and a roof, a new dimension, a cubicle cabin. And then if I sat back down with you two idiots, how could I possibly tell you about my experience? Both of you would compare and contrast my experience to your own experiences, sitting, unable to accept that there are experiences which don't fit into squares, experiences which you haven't yet experienced. The religious zealot would say, I told you so, and then you'd quote some scripture like, seek thy cube in thine heart and receive thy cube in the afterlife. And I'd say, you don't need a book. Those things have been unrecognizably manipulated anyways. The root of all the world's religions are words of beings who stood up, and then they came back to us, sitting back down to try to inspire us to stand up for ourselves. And then you continue reciting that crap in your monotonous square, and then you impress it upon the rest of us with judgment, shame, and guilt and fear. My experience threatens everything you ever believed in, so you become more empowered than ever to propagate the words of the square book in the square world, and I must be a blaspheming witch, occultist, Satanist anyways. The dogmatic rationalist is much simpler. Prove it, you'd say. And I'd respond, prove what? You want me to prove my experience to you? No, I'm trying to inspire you to experience it for yourself. Experience a new dimension for yourself. The scholarly, dogmatic rationalist becomes excited by the opportunity to put his hard-earned knowledge to the task of arguing the impossibility of an experience he hasn't yet had. For nothing could be real which he hasn't yet experienced. And he's certain of this because it's been proven by other dogmatic rationalists whom haven't experienced it either. For those who have experienced it cannot fit it into words or graphs or concepts. For the words and graphs and concepts only exist within the squares. And all that fits into squares are simply regurgitated memories. Consciousness permeates all things, I'd say. And your concept of an empirical corporeal universe is just another assumption from an unexamined place in time-space. It's all performance art passing in front of a screen. Every moment you spend yielding facts, observing and analyzing the screen of perception is a moment wasted in denial of the observer, the one observing. For the observer and the observation are one. There's no proof. You're delusional. Don't become one of them. Believing in woo-woo nonsense, you'd say. But it's not a belief. I'm sworn to never believe anything. I do not believe in anything, for I cannot believe in anything. I experience, and experience is all I can truly deduce, corporeally, scientifically, or otherwise. My experience of life cannot be peer-reviewed or immolated or tested against a control group. I am obligated to use scientific method on myself. My observation of the self through skepticism, the incessant test tube, deducing what cannot be put into words, that which will never fit into squares. Now here's what they call the grace of suffering. One day a car backs into both of my little square friends, the scholarly one and the religious one, and in their suffering they begin doubting all their dumb beliefs. The religious one, finally embracing the internal rage, the absurdity of being, asks, Why, God, I thought we had a deal. I followed your book, and you're supposed to never let anything bad happen to me. That was our deal. Why have you allowed this to happen to me? and the dogmatic rationalist realizes none of his facts are here to help him. All the things he memorized, they're all useless, as he's left alone with nothing but himself. And what did any of it matter anyhow? Matter, facts, knowledge, all of the important things in life had happened in between the certainties, in between the facts, outside of the squares. Love would never fit into squares, neither would life. He had known that oxygen and hydrogen made water, but what was it? What was oxygen? What was water? What was any of it, really? And all their rigid certainties dissipate in their desire to be. And being becomes greater, deeper, stronger. The human becomes being. In desperation, they're forced to move. Slowly, day by day, the will to live and the desire to overcome the god-awful suffering forces them out of their dumb little squares. And they're forced to reckon with the fact that reality itself is uncertain, and the squares were a self-induced hallucination, encircling an unfathomable eternity. The good news is, it seems this life is much more beautiful and bizarre than any of our wildest dreams. And everything in our wildest imaginations exists within a much greater, much wilder imagination, an infinite imagination, which imagined us imagining imagination. And here we are, imagining ourselves stuck in squares.